I'd also like to inform you that as a special gesture of our partnership with TiE, MyCFO is making available a rapid impact assessment available to all TiE members on a good faith, pay what you like basis. I'm sure most of you would have probably, and you should have completed your impact assessment at the respective companies to see how COVID is going to impact your profitability and cash flow positions. But just in case you haven't done that and you're still looking for assistance to do it, just feel free to reach out to us. Again, just put in your email ID and rapid impact assessment on the chat box, and one of my team members will be very happy to come over and assist you. So friends, to kick off with my introductory comments, obviously tough times, and I'm really going to focus my attention on probably the story with 80-85% of the companies out there that probably do not have access to debt, who probably do not have equity investments in them right now, and are wondering how they're going to be able to survive. So some of the themes that we're picking up from our clients and from the chatter in the market is to really focus on a few core principles. So the first is to determine and define very, very clearly as to what is the core of the business. This is the time for you to conserve cash. You've got to be brutal about cutting out what you believe is non-essential to the survival of the business. This is a point of time where anything that's on your balance sheet, whether it's debtors, inventory, you've got to figure a way of converting that to cash. If you've got vendor payments, you've got to figure out ways to push it out. But stay liquid. That's the oxygen that is going to ensure that your company survives. The P&L view at this point is almost irrelevant. What really matters is the cash flow view. But it all starts with you determining what you believe is a core of the organization. So if it's team, if it's technologies, core business processes, key customer contracts, focus on that. Everything else at this point is going to be irrelevant. The second aspect of us will need to think about is, are we better off shutting down for the next 6 to 9 months time? If capital has got to come in either from our own pockets as entrepreneurs, or it's got to come in from an angel investor or a PE or a VC fund, what is this capital going to be used for? If it's going to support a burn that is not really going to add value in the longer term, is it better for you to shut operations for 6 months, 9 months, and possibly come back and relaunch, maybe in a slightly different avatar? But do you need to look at some of these very unconventional and, I think in an Indian context, fairly unpalatable ways to ride through this crisis and possibly bide your time? I was at a different webinar yesterday, and one of the speakers gave a very interesting example to say that it's almost like playing a cricket match, and you're chasing a target, you're behind on the Duckworth-Lewis, and it begins to pour, right? And there's no hope of the game resuming. No matter how hard you try and play in the pitch, it may not really help, right? The game is gone, at least for the time being. I'm not suggesting this is a situation that all of us are in. I'm only calling for conservation of personal capital and whether it is better deployed at a future point in time. The third aspect that a lot of companies are currently grappling with is how to deal with people. I'm not a lawyer, and it's not my intention to kind of touch upon the legal aspects of what you should be doing. However, we all need to remember that if there is a boat, there is a possibility to save the sailors on the boat. You have to be a little careful in your attempt to try and carry everyone along. There is a very real danger that the boat itself, which is a business, may not exist, in which case there is going to be really no jobs to protect in maybe 3 to 6 months' time. One can be as humane as possible about these decisions, and obviously communications to vendors, to investors, to employees is going to be key. So the good practice that we have seen among companies who are dealing with this well is that they are communicating very regularly, very frequently, and they're being very transparent about the way in which they are dealing with the current situation with all their internal and external stakeholders. Obviously, the shape of the recovery curve, whether it's a V or a U or a L, is a big debate in the world now. I don't think there is one reality for all of us. I think for each one of us, the curve is going to be different. And we'll have to probably kind of think about that at some stage as to how the curve looks. But the focus of this webinar is largely on figuring out how to deal with the crisis over the next 3 to 4 weeks time, and how do we kind of stay afloat from a liquidity standpoint. Yeah, with those comments, I would now like to turn over the platform to Rajesh for his introductory comments. Rajesh.
Well, I think Venkat, thanks. You set the tone for the conversation, and I couldn't agree more with you. These are tough times. Everybody's going to have a different reality. There's no one rule that fits all, and this is a classic time frame for this. I'm sure most of us on this call are, have been on have had similar conversations with other entrepreneurs, with other investors. We have all been busy with webinars, so I'm sure the audience here also has been very busy with their conversations, trying to make sense of what next and what happens when this ends. When will it end? These are all questions. One thing I can share is that no one knows. I've been talking to a lot of people, Venkat, Atul. We've all been, conversing with a lot of different stakeholders across the globe, and there is really no guidance on this. So I think we all the reason the time now is very risky. We all feel that risk and that uncertainty is because uh, these are new times. We've never been here before as an economy, as the world, and as entrepreneurs or investors. So I as liquid as you can, not only for your own personal assets, but also within your businesses. This is not the time to be discussing of how do we grow after 3 months. Because we don't know whether it's going to be 3 months, it's going to be 1 month, it's going to be 6 months, and it's going to be vary from business to business. And you may find yourself to be in a much better place, but then you're not an isolated island, right? We're all interlinked, more so, nowadays than we were earlier. So we may find ourselves in a good place, but our suppliers, our vendors, our customers, our employees, we may all have different states in which we find ourselves. So this is a time to be extra cautious. This is a time to be, more liquid than you can. And we've been talking to all our portfolio companies and other companies that we mentor, and we've been just repeating this non-stop. Be as liquid, be as risk averse in these times as possible. Just cut your expenses wherever you can, whether, and for most early stage companies and smaller companies, one of the larger part of that cost cutting is salaries, and then followed by rentals, and technology and other spends. We can't be mercenary and say, okay, just cut everybody and, get it to zero. But I think the goal that we have been following and working with companies is to bring down the cost structure to as low as we can without impacting the future of the business and also the future of our people and our stakeholders. It's a very tight balance. It's not an easy, it's very easy to say that. It's very, very difficult to execute it. And I think that is one of the reasons for this webinar is that we are all walking a tightrope. And the best way forward will be for all of us to share our ideas and talk about it and get feedback. And then, we all will be highly benefited with that. So yeah, Venkat, that's it from me. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Atul, would you like to share your introductory comments, please?
Yeah, thanks, Venkat, and thanks, Rajesh, for sharing your views. I can't agree more on this. I mean, this is like times which are completely unheard of. Although in my earlier venture, also Edu Christine, we started in middle of 2008. That was worst time previous to this. But this is no comparison or no match to, I mean, what is happening around. 2008 was difficult, but this is like unprecedented, unheard of, and nobody is like prepared for it. I mean, it's completely different. Rajesh and Venkat have said overall perspective. I'll come more from operational side. See, if you have to save on cash, you need to know, first thing that we should do is start measuring it, right? So as an entrepreneur, as a person who is like doing business, there is one thing that's must at this point of time is have a very, very close look at what all we are doing on everyday basis. Maybe every day we look at balance, what is outstanding, where we are doing, and where things are going out. So if I mean, basic philosophy being that if you have to control, you have to measure, and it has to be like really, really short term. If you're doing maybe monthly planning, it's time to switch to daily planning. That's most important part right now for, I mean, that's what from operational side I can suggest. The other thing is, nothing is fixed cost. I mean, in times like these, many of us, we tend to believe that rentals are fixed or some other costs are fixed, but believe me, uh, nothing is fixed, and all we need to do is go out and ask for renegotiate on rentals, renegotiate on rates, renegotiate on whatever payouts are happening. Times are difficult for everybody, so we have to be empathetic and careful with the other parties also, but at the same time, it's a question of survival, and we have to be like extremely uh, upfront and asking about wherever we can cut down the cost. So we have to have this belief that no cost is fixed, everything is like there to ask for and reduce. So that has to be the approach overall. The third thing obviously is, as Rajesh and Venkat also said, nobody knows when it's going to last. It's whether it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. We have no clue how long it will take, and therefore uh, we can't go for any kind of capex, whether it is like setting up new things or new product or anything new, because we don't know even if we are able to build it, whether we'll be ship it out or not. I mean, I'll take our example itself. We had rolled out an app with some features, and the next day we had to shut it down because we were not able to back it with operations, right? So you don't know. I mean, we invested so much time and effort on getting it rolled out, but then it's at least for the timing, we are not able to get benefit out of it. So it's very important to, as Venkat said, do what is core to your business, stick to it, cut as many processes as possible, be as lean as possible, and then try to generate revenue from those very, very limited, very core processes all around the company. I think that's really, really important. And for us as a company, it's extremely important to communicate. I think uh, anyone running a company, people around us, the team around us are core to us. I mean, if they are there, if they are aligned, if they know what is happening, if they are supporting us to sail through, I mean, nothing is more motivating than that. I mean, that's the most important thing. So all people, the entire team has to know what is happening, and believe me, they will contribute. I mean, once they know about it, once they know the situation, and then you go back and say that, boss, we have to survive, and one way to do that is we have to take short term, we have to lose on short term benefits, which maybe in terms of losing out salaries for a couple of months. And believe me, they are all aligned. I mean, if they are communicated properly, I have seen 80%, but they are all aligned and all there and contributing more than ever to the betterment of the organization. So on operational side, I think these 3-4 things is what I would like to comment right now. One, most important thing is measure. I mean, it's not time for monthly budgeting, it's time for daily budgeting. And you have to be on top of the cash flows on daily basis. The second point is nothing is fixed. I mean, you have all the costs are variable. All you need to do is go out and ask. But at the same time, we need to understand that everyone is facing the same situation. So we have to be empathetic at the same time and understand the other party's situation. And the third most important thing is communicate. I mean, we have to go out and communicate to everyone. Most importantly, people around us, because they are the one who are supporting us to sail through this difficult situation, and obviously to customers and investors, but most important, people, and cut down on any capex which is not core to us or any process which is not core to us. So those are, I think, my introductory comments for this. Venkat, to you now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Atul, for providing that operator's perspective. So Rajesh, if I can come to you, Brad, I think a lot of the conversation so far has been really on what we can do on the operations side, which I would really say more P&L to say, okay, how do we kind of try and cut out costs, etc. But on the balance sheet side, particularly from a financing angle, are there any avenues at all that companies have to raise capital? I mean, are you able to share any perspectives, either from experience with your portfolio companies or otherwise? I mean, are banks lending? Are NBFCs providing any kind of bill discounting options? I mean, are you as an investor happy to look at new cases right now for funding, or are you kind of sticking to making follow-on rounds in existing investments?
Yeah, I think no, that's a good question. Actually, balance sheet in these times is as important as the P&L and the cash flows that we all look at. That said, this is a time where so just to take a step back, we've all got into the situation without any warning signs. It just happened, and it's like a moving vehicle which has just come to a stop suddenly. So there's going to be impact. We all have to do all that it takes to get out of it. On the balance sheet side, and I can share some examples of what we are doing with our portfolio companies as well as some other companies that we are talking to. As Equanimity, we continue to evaluate fresh investments. We are in advanced conversations we have been in advanced conversations with a few of them earlier. And, I can share with you that even today, so we have a call in the morning and a call in the evening, our own internal team calls. We went through a fresh candidate, a new company that we haven't looked at earlier. And, one of the team members, Karan, was presenting his thoughts, detailed research on the company. So we continue to monitor and evaluate new and it's not just us. We've been talking to many other investors, and I think most of us echo the same thing. First priority for every fund house out there is to help existing portfolio companies, and I think that's just obvious. But none of them so far have said that we'll stop looking at new companies completely. As I said, we've all got into the situation abruptly. It just happened. So most of the investors are sitting on dry powder. We all have capital to be deployed. A small part of that will go to supporting existing companies, but a major chunk can be deployed for fresh investments. That's on the equity side of the balance sheet. On the debt side of the balance sheet, the liability side of the balance sheet, I'm sure all of us are aware of steps that the government has announced and is taking. So if you haven't already and you run a business, please go start talking to SIDBI, start talking to the startup folks in Delhi. SIDBI has announced a variety of new schemes to help startups and early stage companies and SMEs. So please take advantage of that. One of our companies, their business has come to a grinding halt completely. They were into the business of managing events and banquet halls and all of that, which is completely zero. They were banking with a public sector bank, and the bank is extending the loan, fresh loan to them, an additional top-up loan to them. So banks are open for business. It's not that they are not. Of course, we all will go through our own processes. You'll have to answer many more questions than you were, getting asked earlier. You'll have to chase people much more because now you just can't land up at anyone's office. Someone has to reply to an email or pick up your phone calls. So I understand all of those are hitches, but business is on. Everybody is working from home, so the pace of work has gone off a little bit, but the work is still happening. Bill discounting again, for most companies who are dealing with larger corporates as clients, and if you have those corporates who are working with their banks, etc., you can, if the corporate permits, you can avail of factoring, bill discounting, etc. With most platforms, and these are, some of them are online platforms, some of them are banks. So as I said, business is going on, not as usual at a slower pace, but business is still going on. So if you find yourself short of capital, with one caveat, by the way, and that is what Venkat said in the beginning, this is not the time to manage business as usual. You have to just focus on your core and cut off everything else that you can. So I think as long as most businesses will actually not require too much money if you really get down to bare bone structure and just focus on what is essential. But I think if you need external capital, there are sources. Everybody's on for business.
Got it. Thanks for that, Rajesh. So what we have seen, totally agree with Rajesh's assessment, especially on the debt side. We are finding that ability to raise capital is a function of what is the quality of the balance sheet. So there are companies that have got sanctioned limits where companies hadn't drawn it down. Obviously, they're kind of going out and now availing the limits fully. And the ability to leverage further. I mean, if there are assets, good quality assets, I think there still exists that possibility. We have seen that across some of our clients. In some companies, however, the corporate balance sheets are not that great, in which case entrepreneurs have had to go back and look at their personal balance sheets. Unfortunately, as entrepreneurs, this is not the best time to be liquidating any asset. I mean, most of us would probably be invested in, say, real estate or mutual funds or shares, and we know what kind of knocking the valuations have currently taken. So what we are seeing is several of our client entrepreneurs who are going out and taking a loan against some of these assets, thereby kind of avoiding the need to go off and sell these assets at discount valuations today, and then trying to kind of put that money into the company as equity. In general, I think what we have found is that in manufacturing kind of setups, particularly those that are already leveraged, the ability to kind of borrow more is going to be somewhat limited. In services, companies might be slightly better off in terms of being able to manage the financing situation. If I could quickly come to you, Atul, on a different topic, right, which is that ultimately if there's only limited cash in the bank, right, one will have to start prioritizing. So how does one thinks about the rules for a prioritization? How do you decide who gets paid, who doesn't get paid? Would you like to share any insights from your experience?
Thanks, Venkat. So for us, the most important thing has been continuity of business. So the way we are prioritizing our payments, so there are something which are required. As you said, there are some core operations that has to be there. And if it is like, in our case, it's like buying raw materials. So we have to make the payments there. I mean, there's no choice there actually. We have to make payments to procure the raw material. We have to make payments to ensure that the logistics and transportations and things like that are taken care of. So anything that is core to business and it's important for continuity of the business, we have to make that payment, and that's the first priority for us. Followed by that is the overheads which are required and essential for us. For example, I mean things like salaries and maybe rentals where we cannot get it off waived off, or those things. So they are the second in line. But the decision making for us is clearly the points which are core to our business and which are required for continuity of the business. So that's how we are prioritizing right now, I think, if that's helpful.
Got it. Thank you, Atul. One of the questions that has come up here is about how do we think about the people equation, right? So what looks fair and absolutely essential from a business point is to possibly communicate termination of employment, or at least keep cuts in salary, or possibly deferments. But equally, there is an entire human and a soft aspect that is involved over here. So any thoughts, Rajesh, in terms of what's a good way to be thinking about striking the right balance?
Yeah, this is the trickiest part of it all. Just to give you background, so I did my MBA from XLRI in business and finance once upon a time. And we used to run, the campus used to run two courses. One was business management and the other one was HR, right? And at that time, I was a business management student, right? I was interested in finance, etc. At that time, all of us used to think, HR mein kya hota hai? Kya karna kya hai? I'm telling you, there's so much, so far away from the truth. It's when you start living in the real world and managing real businesses and interacting with people, etc., you realize that is so damn important. It is so damn important than spreadsheets and strategizing and all of that. And it's times like this that really bring that fact to the fore. I think the biggest challenge today is not about capital. All those are challenges, capital, business continuity, etc. But I think the biggest challenge today for everyone around, no matter which business you are in, is about people. You have to, this is a time when you need to tilt the balance more towards EQ rather than IQ. So we need IQ to run the business and manage, whatever we're doing. But these are times when the human in us has to come to the fore. We cannot be cutting costs. When we think of cutting costs, we cannot be just laying off people or just cutting salaries indiscriminately, like a mercenary. You have to have that human face. And as I said in my beginning introduction as well, the tightrope that we are all walking today is about, you want to survive, the business has to survive, which is for the greater good. It's good for the employees as well. But for that survival, what all needs to be done? So if some people have to take cost cuts, in the cost cut, some people have to take salary cuts, then so be it. You will be surprised, in our portfolio, we've talked to all our companies, most of them had no problems in getting employees to agree voluntarily to take salary cuts. Right. The question, as Atul said, it's about over communication. If you communicate to everybody, if you make them understand what's happening, where the business is finding itself, why are we doing what we are doing? I think we are all stuck at home. We are all working from home, so we all understand the magnitude of the problem. We all understand the uncertainty. All of us, each of us, I think in a day, at least till some time back, I was seeing everybody, 50-60% of our bandwidth is about COVID. The WhatsApp is about COVID, Facebook is about COVID, LinkedIn is about COVID. You talk to anyone, you're talking about, everybody's an expert on virality and viruses and all of that. So I think, we all understand the problem. And if you communicate that and over communicate, right, that will, I think, tilt the balance in your favor. There is no easy answer here. I will not say that, okay, 25% salary cut or 50% salary cut is what we should do, because there's no one rule, as I said in the beginning, for everybody. Setup is different, the salary are different, the need for people are different. But I think easy areas to let go of at this time or cut salaries is first founders themselves. So we've seen a lot of founders voluntarily taking a significant salary cut. Some of them have gone to zero. In some cases, we've asked them to go to zero, given what we foresee for those businesses. Tough choices, but then you have to do that. In some cases, we had to send some people on furlough, saying, okay, we'll see 1 month, you just sit at home, no pay, no nothing, but you have your job in place. We've also been very actively trying to figure out the legality part of it. So what happens from a legal perspective? Are you defaulting? Are you against, doing things which are against the letter of the law? So we are evaluating that aspect as well. But there are no easy answers. But I would agree with what Atul said earlier, that there is nothing called as fixed cost at this time. And you have to do what it takes to ensure business continuity.
Got it. Atul, would you like to chime in? Any additional thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, so most important and thing is, we have to value the power of people around you. If you communicate and if you empower, they come up with suggestions which are like crazy. One of my team member who is quite junior actually, and he was managing stores. He went ahead and on his own negotiated revised rental with the landlord, and then came back to us and said that we are able to renegotiate rental by more than 30%, right? Which was completely unexpected. But why he did it is because as an organization, we have been able to communicate that this is a time where every cost has to be looked very carefully and thoroughly. That is one part, that everyone has to know what is the situation, and most importantly, empower them to take decision on the ground, because many a times, the kind of decision that they take is much better what we sitting in and most of us actually are working from home we can do. So that is one. The second thing, and related to that only, is the team is really empathetic. In our case, we have seen that people came forward and say that, okay, let's not reduce any salary for someone whose salary is lesser, rather than we take higher salary cuts at the higher level, right? So it's not uniform salary cut everywhere. The higher the team, they voluntarily took 60-70% cut, 50% cut, and then slightly lower half of that, and even lower we didn't had any cuts. So we divided in 3 categories, and and this was a suggestion that came from the team itself, right? So if we are able to empower the team, if we are able to communicate the situation that we are in, they themselves come up with suggestions and things that are very relevant and helps us and survive for the longer term. At the same time, it's always about the larger good. So if we have to survive at the company, because that will help us larger set of people to carry forward with their career and aspirations and all. And for that, if we have to, let's say, let go some people or put them on leave or something, that's also fine. And even those guys are fine with it because they understand that it's none of their fault. It's not that they are bad in their job or something. It's just that it's the requirement right now of the situation. So they completely understand. And while doing it, I think again the point which is very relevant is we have to be respectful to them, right? Because it's not that they are bad, it's just the situation. So that has to be clearly communicated. And if done properly, we have seen like people are happily there to contribute. I mean, they understand the problem and they are there to contribute.
Yeah. Very true.
Thanks for the perspective, Atul. So the reaction that we have seen from most of our clients is to kind of go back to vendors, right? I mean, that's wherever the businesses are still operational, to go back to vendors, renegotiate the rates. We are finding that vendors are extremely sensitive to these kind of requests. What they want is an assurance that the cash flow cycles will kind of come back on track. Everybody is currently worried about how to have adequate cash to be able to cover the core fixed costs. So I think as you're able to kind of agree some kind of schedule, the ability to go out and negotiate great rates with vendors is possibly very high at this point. The other area that we have seen a lot of deep cuts coming in is rentals. That clearly is being seen as a non-core, especially because work from home. Probably over the last 3 weeks, everybody has kind of figured out how to kind of optimally work, and most of the people that I'm talking to are saying, "Look, I'm not sure whether I'm going to go back to the old office that I had." Because I don't see the need for it, right? So even if people are going to go back, maybe they'll go back to 50% of the space that they were in. So I think that's one area where I think across the board, I think virtually all companies have kind of renegotiated. Or side, obviously, increments are gone. Any kind of variable payouts gone. No, we're not really seeing any new recruitments. I think different companies have evolved different rules on how to think about people. For example, contract staff in most companies has been let go of before on-roll staff. Some people have taken a different view with regard to, say, people on probation versus team members who have been on the roles for a longer period of time. We have also seen the concept of, I was told that the concept of furlough apparently is not a legally accepted concept here in India. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but there seems to be a concept of garden leave where you're saying that, look, I don't want to terminate anybody, but I want to kind of put the salary payouts on freeze for X period of time. And of course, as both Atul and Rajesh spoke about, and I can see that Harry has also chimed in with his comment, we are seeing salary cuts, a graded salary cut where the folks on top are kind of taking a much sharper cut. And different companies have got thresholds below which they've said they will not cut salaries, right? So in some cases, 25,000 per month, 35,000 per month, 45,000 per month. But folks who are really at the lower end of the salary spectrum, I think across the board, most companies have taken a very humane view to say that, look, we will not ask any of those people to forego any proportion of their salaries. I also saw another question from one of the participants as to whether it's better for the pain to be spread across multiple people, or whether it's better for some people to bear the brunt and they're let go of. Okay, I think probably the reality is somewhere that it's going to be a combination of the two, right? If there are whole aspects of your business that you've decided to sacrifice so that the rest of the organization can survive, as what Atul said, then probably you've got to let go of whole teams of people. Non-performers, I think those decisions should have been taken anyway, but a lot of people are now suddenly more conscious about the baggage that they're carrying, and they're kind of letting go of those people. But my own sense is that today I don't think it's an either or issue. I don't think it's about you either letting go of people or taking a salary cut. I think most companies are kind of forced to do some combination. The proportions may kind of vary from one company to another. Yeah, so if we can come back to you, Rajesh, to kind of get your views on, for companies who are kind of looking for capital, are there any particular types of industry verticals or possibly business models that you think will possibly kind of come into vogue or will find more favor now with the investor community?
Yeah, this is one of the questions I've answered so many times over the last few weeks. But no, look, I'm a believer that this problem will get sorted. There's this whole chatter going on about how life is going to be very different after pre-COVID and post-COVID. Unfortunately, I don't believe in that. I think we are all human beings are creatures of habit. We will go back to how things were. You just need to invent that vaccine. If there is a vaccine, everything goes back to normal. It is going to take time. I'm not saying tomorrow everything is going back to normal. So I am not a believer in that V curve thing and everything goes back to normal. No, things will take time as they pan out. But I mean, top of the mind, if you ask me, so for example, a company that is making ice creams, will they continue to sell ice creams after COVID? Yes. Can you build a business around it? Yes. So I'm not a believer that certain businesses will be better off than others. But the way to think about it as an investor, and I think as an entrepreneur, we all should be cognizant of this one fact, is in the interim, and the interim can be actually 12 to 18 months. Businesses which require a lot of people to get together in one place will remain impacted. And businesses that don't require too many people to aggregate in one place, will be as normal as can be. But that's an interim kind of impact. Are we changing at Equanimity, are we changing our investment philosophy because of this whole COVID thing? No, we continue to do what we are doing. But now when we start analyzing new businesses or even our existing portfolio companies, we put this variable in that equation to figure out goes into that equation, which earlier never did. So I don't think. I mean, the normal answer I've heard is healthcare. Health tech will really, boom. Digital businesses. So are you guys able to hear me? Because it says connection is unstable.
Yeah, we're able to hear you now. There was a little bit of disturbance, but
Okay.
it seems to be fine now.
Okay. Sorry, I was saying, where was I? Lost my chain of thought there.
You're talking about health tech.
Yeah. So the normal answers,
yes.
for the benefit of the participants here, the normal answers that I hear are health tech will become better. Those businesses which are digital, more digital will become better. So online teaching, e-commerce, all businesses that can be transacted online will be benefited. And I mean, I think they'll be benefited in the midterm. I don't see education moving online completely. I've always been a believer on an online-offline combination model, and I think that will continue to gain traction. Will this whole experience? We are all doing meetings on Zoom now. Once this whole virus thing gets sorted out, will we continue to do meetings on Zoom, or would we rather prefer sitting in front of would I rather prefer sitting in front of this whole audience and talking to them? I will go back to my original behavior and say, let's gather together in a room and then let's have a panel discussion there. So in the interim, there'll be changes, but long term, I think it'll all get back.
Got back. Okay. Atul, if I can come back to you on this question, I mean, do you see yourself doing the same businesses in the same way post COVID, or do you think that can you give us some examples of any modifications that you might be thinking from a strategy or a business model or a delivery perspective in your business?
No, we are like a few of the fortunate lots where we have been able to carry out our business and we have been able to continue. So we have been one of the fortunate guys actually in this period. For us, the one of the key change and belief changes, right? I was earlier firm believer of that, people should work from office. Now I believe that work from home works, right? So significantly, I mean, if the team is comfortable, maybe by having multiple locations, and that should not be a concern. So the bigger office and having everyone together and having a lot of meetings, and these things are required, but will be significantly lower compared to what we were doing earlier. And that is one. In terms of larger business and operations, I think online is certainly going to there. As Rajesh said, the low touch point is required. So the deliveries and everything is there, will be there in the shorter term. But in long term, I think I agree with Rajesh there also, that the habits of people are unlikely to change. These are difficult times. Everyone is trying to adjust. Some of this will carry over, certainly. But I believe most of it will come back actually once we are through this situation. It's just a matter of time.
Correct. So, Rajesh, one question I've been curious to ask you about is, for some of the more traditional dyed-in-the-wool chartered accountants like me, we've never been able to understand how valuations are done in the startup world, right? And a lot of investor money has kind of gone to support the cash burn, in the early days of the business. And again, if you look at the profile of the spend, it's been largely towards customer acquisition. So post-COVID or during COVID, typically, what's your view as an investor? I mean, will you as somebody who is putting in equity, continue to take a bet on these kind of models, or are we likely to see a degree of skepticism or caution kind of coming in on how companies are actually utilizing this capital?
Yeah, it's a fair point, but I must tell you that not just chartered accountants, but also people like us, we don't understand valuations much. we try, we keep learning every now and then. Look, in all fairness, this whole theory about valuation, from a theoretical perspective in finance, is not very old, right? So Harry Markowitz in 1953 came out with this paper on portfolio and those things. So those are the bases on which we all are valuing businesses. As you go down the life cycle of a business, from a very mature business, when you come down to a very new business, a startup kind of business, the number of variables increase. And whenever in any equation, number of variables go up, uncertainty and the risk goes up. So valuing businesses is anyway fraught with risks. And when you are valuing startups, there's more so I always say that valuation is a mix of art and science, and for startups it is more art and less science. So the lesser models we make, the lesser projections we do, I think it will serve all of us better. But that said, will valuations change? I think again at Equanimity, a little background about myself. I spent nearly 20 years with a true blue investment firm, Franklin Templeton, where I was part of Dr. Mobius's team, and we were doing valuation. We were value investors. So the whole approach, the whole mindset has been one of paying heed to fundamentals, paying heed to valuations, etc. So we've never found ourselves investing in any business where the valuation were completely out of whack. Now, I also understand there are all kinds of investors. Everybody has a very different take on how to invest, what to invest, how much to invest, etc. So there's no one cookie cutter rule, and focusing on valuation, is not everybody's game. But at Equanimity, our game has been always to back entrepreneurs who we believe are able to execute on the ground whatever business models they are working on at a reasonable price. Right? Because if the valuation is reasonable, it will remain a win-win kind of situation. So when we enter into areas like this and times like these, we are not doing anything different. At our firm, we will continue to do what we were doing because, we never chased companies regardless of valuation. Right? Valuation has always been important to us. But I think if you were to put all VCs together, some of the bubbling that we saw earlier. Right, we were not in a bubble zone, by the way. That's been my view. But some of the bubble, the traits of a bubble that we saw earlier will get rationalized. People are all logical, so we'll all start asking some questions that we were not asking earlier. And therefore, I think as an entrepreneur, it's not that you have to now prepare yourself for lower valuation, but I think to prepare yourself to be able to answer and justify whatever in your eyes is the valuation of the company. So valuations will not take a hit, in my opinion. But yes, money will try to now find home, which is safer. Money will go more to people who have demonstrated that they've been able to execute well in the past, and they've not been just burning money because they could. So that change will happen.
Got it. Thank you, Rajesh. I'm just looking at the list of questions. I'm going to take one got to do with impact assessment. So there's a question on what that means, etc. So I think very simply put, it's about being able to build different scenarios in your business, largely around the cash flow angle. So one, how quickly can you collect your old debtors, and whether you are in a position to liquidate your inventory at all. What happens if the collection cycle times, which were probably say 30 days, 45 days in the past, what happens if it moves to 90 days, 120 days? What happens if a certain percentage of your collectibles become bad? What happens if the revenue that you're currently doing, the run rate that you have, if it kind of comes down by 25%, 50%, 75%? So obviously you now have got a range of scenarios that will then give you what we call as a cash gap. What is the kind of bridge financing that you need to be able to kind of ride through this crisis? So this is all on the numerator side to say what is the cash we're able to generate. On the denominator, you're kind of taking a look at what is the absolute core cash outflow that you need to plan for. And that's where we kind of discussed options around rent, people, vendor negotiations, and the rest of it. So after doing all of that, what is the absolute core cash outflow that you need to be planning for? That becomes a denominator. So once you have the numerator and denominator, you're basically saying, okay, this many months of cash runway is what I have. At this point, we are recommending that everybody should be planning at least for a 6-month kind of a runway. And depending on whom you talk to, somebody will say it's 12 months, somebody will say it's 24 months. Several companies that we know are probably looking at 2 weeks, 3 weeks of runway. So obviously, they're not going to get to 6 months immediately. It's going to take some time for them to get there. But be as it may, I think you need to kind of have a target to kind of build that runway. Now, in cases where we are not able to kind of build that runway through operations, you'll obviously have to look at external funding, and that's where looking at a combination of debt or equity becomes important. What I covered a little bit earlier in my introductory comments is that if there is really no business case for the business to be kept alive at all, then the question is as to, are you better off, rather than trying to do this to just shut it down and possibly revive it after some time. Yeah, there's the impact assessment is obviously more a business assessment, while it's kind of done on an Excel spreadsheet. It's got to have inputs after having spoken to all your customers and vendors. So it's kind of rooted very much in your specific business reality. We are kind of recommending that, this should have got done, but if it's not got done, then this can be done in say maybe 3 to 4 days time. So happy to kind of assist anybody who needs that. The other question that we have is on which industries are going to be impacted, etc. I think a lot of this has been debated quite a lot. So anything to do with discretionary, travel, tourism, hotels, obviously it's going to take some time to kind of come out. Companies in auto components, I think a lot of these industries were in stress even before COVID came along. I think the recovery path will be much longer. Real estate, building, construction, all allied industries, probably longer paths. Sectors that are relatively less impacted, education, digital businesses, anything to do with pharma, healthcare, is where infrastructure, we believe will probably be able to bounce back faster. But honestly, this is, there are several reports that are kind of floating around, and if you can share your email IDs, I'm more than happy to mail you these reports. My own view on all of this is, this is a 35,000 feet view of the world. I think right now, while it's important to kind of keep an eye out on the macro trends, etc., I think you've got to look at your business reality and really make that impact assessment, rather than go by a report that somebody else has written. Yeah, so we're kind of winding down towards 1 hour time that we have, and I'm going to quickly go across to both Rajesh and Atul to quickly check if you have any closing comments that you'd like to summarize in about 30 to 60 seconds each.
Let me go first. I think for closing, I would just reiterate what we've discussed over the last hour or so. Focus on essentials. I think I like one of the sentences Atul used saying, no cost is fixed anymore. Everything is variable. And as entrepreneurs, we have to question each and every item on the P&L as well as the balance sheet. Because remember, the cash flow statement is made out of P&L and balance sheet both. So we have to pay a lot of attention to each of those line items, cut down wherever possible, But at the same time, you can't be mercenary about this cutting down. You have to have that humane face to be brought into that whole exercise. So tough times, but I'm sure at the end of this whole thing will be those entrepreneurs, investors, businesses that will come out much more stronger. So all the best to all of us.
Thank you, Rajesh. Atul?
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. For me, actually, this is second time in big crisis. We started our earlier venture, as I said, in 2008. But one big learning that carried forward is in times like these is when you build character, not only individually, but also as an organization, right? And what you build right now will last forever. Be it with your own team, be it with your customer, be it with your investors, with anyone that you interact with. And that's what is going to carry forward, right? So obviously for all of us, the short-term goal is to be cash positive or increase our runway as much as possible. But at the same time, we have to understand that this is temporary. This has to go away. The time frame may be questionable, 3 months, 6 months, 12, 24, we don't know what, but this will go away. And when it goes away, the character that we build for ourselves, for our organization, the culture that we build is going to last. And that's what is going to carry forward. So we need to keep an eye open for that as well. So that's what I think is the most important thing for which I would like to put forward.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks, Atul.
Excellent.
I would just like to conclude by saying that if there is one characteristic that sets aside entrepreneurs from everybody else, it is resilience. I think this phase is going to teach us who among us are true risk takers and who are not. I'm a strong believer that entrepreneurs, they go through so many cycles and daily disappointments and euphorias. If there is one breed of Homo sapiens which is kind of well qualified and capable of kind of coming out of this crisis, I think it is an entrepreneurial community. So back yourself. I think it's a time where your convictions are going to be tested. But this cannot last forever, right? I think we will see light at the end of the tunnel. The last thing I'd like to say is, let's not make the mistake of equating ourselves to the business, right? We as beings are much larger than the business. You've got a life that is beyond the business. We are a much more holistic persona than just being an entrepreneur or a business manager. Take care of your own physical and mental health. I think that's the number one priority right now. And it can be very stressful. I know there are difficult decisions. Most of us are kind of working a lot harder than what we used to in a pre-COVID scenario. But don't neglect yourself, right? It's a time, when other people are making multiple demands on you. The one person who should be reaching out to help you is you yourself. Okay, so don't ignore to spend time with yourself on a daily basis. Take care of yourself both physically and mentally. Yeah, with that, I'd like to bring the session to a conclusion. I'd like to thank TiE for putting together this wonderful platform and bringing a lovely bunch of entrepreneurs together. Thank you for your wholehearted participation. I think just from the flow of questions, it was easy to see that you're fully engaged. And I think can be more motivating to a panel than seeing the rapid fire of questions coming through from the participants. Atul, Rajesh, truly delighted to have hosted both of you. I know that you've got your own businesses to run, and it must be incredibly busy for both of you. But the points that you made were very practical. They were to the point. They really cut to the chase. So thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom with the group today. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for this. This is pretty
Thank
good.
you, Rajesh
Thanks.
and Atul.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
For an
Thanks,
interesting
Venkat.
session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.